Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bridge from the Past, Art Across U.S. History. I'm your host, Mary, and this series is for students like you to get ahead in your history class by using images as a starting point to think about important topics in American history. Throughout the summer, we've been looking at images connected to the Lincoln Memorial and how, or if, the meaning of the memorial has changed over time. Today, we're going to look at the final chapter, the 1963 March on Washington. How does this alter, or did it alter, the meaning of the memorial? Let's jump in and see. Here is our starting image. Again, we're thinking about the meaning of the Lincoln Memorial. We've looked at two other episodes that occurred at the Lincoln Memorial in history to help us think about how the meaning of the monument, or if the meaning of the monument, has changed over time. In 1922, we learned about the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial. In 1939, we explored images of a free public concert given by world-famous singer Mary Patterson on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial after she was denied the use of Constitution Hall because she was an African American. Now I can see here from my source line, we are in 1963 and we have another March on Washington. So in my starting image, I can see the Washington Monument, I can see the reflecting pool, I can see many people gathered around the reflecting pool, and I can see seats here, but I can't see the Lincoln Memorial. But since we've looked at other pictures of the memorial, I remember that the memorial is sort of up front here and it faces down and looks at the Washington Monument. So about 50,000 people attended the 1922 dedication of the Lincoln Memorial. Approximately 75,000 came to Mary Patterson's concert in 1939, and now we're in 1963. I'm really bad with guessing numbers, but this looks like a huge crowd to me. So that's one question I have right off the bat is, who are all these people? Why are they here? How many people are here? What's going on? I have one more image to whet your appetite, and this is a close-up of people in the crowd. And I am sort of struck by this man here. His mouth is open. This man's mouth is open. Maybe they're singing or talking or yelling, but he's holding hands with someone. I can't see the other person he's holding hands with. But I noticed that this is an integrated crowd. I see Blacks and I see whites, and I have seen in other images from our series on the Lincoln Memorial that segregation was the norm. So that's already something that's sort of jumping out to me. So I have some initial questions, but as always with a primary source, it's important to think about the historical context before I can go any further. So without further ado, what do we need to know about this 1963 March on Washington and the Lincoln Memorial? Well, first of all, the civil rights movement gained national prominence in the 1950s and 1960s. So if you've watched other episodes of Bridge from the Past, you know that we've argued that the civil rights movement really doesn't start in the 20th century, but it's really coming to the fore. And if you think about it, television and media is playing a much bigger role in the United States culturally. So more people are aware of this fight for equality and justice that's taking place, particularly in the South. In 1963, labor, religious groups, and civil rights groups all came together to stage a protest in Washington, D.C., fighting for civil and economic rights for African Americans. So the full title of this march is the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It's usually referred to as the 1963 March on Washington or the March on Washington. It gets shortened a little bit. So that's what we're dealing with here. 250,000 people attended this march on August 28th in 1963. It was one of the largest political rallies in U.S. history, and many famous people were in attendance as well, musicians, athletes, celebrities. And from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, where the march ended, so it stopped at the Lincoln Memorial, this is where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is going to give his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. So what I have over here is the program from the March on Washington that day. And you can see just from zooming in a little bit that he was towards the bottom of the list. So he wasn't the only speaker, but he's the speaker that we remember the most that day. Another thing worth pointing out is that the program began with music, with the national anthem, and specifically Mary Patterson singing it. Unfortunately, Marian Anderson didn't make it there in time to open the ceremony, but she did sing later in the program once she was able to get, sort of get herself situated. So that's something that kind of resonates with me because someone who's running late often. So I'll go back to the bottom of the program here, and you can see Martin Luther King as the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, which is another group we've explored before on Bridge from the Past, is going to give his famous remarks. And at the very end of this ceremony, more music, "We Shall Overcome," an incredibly powerful song associated with the civil rights movement. If you've never heard it, I strongly encourage you to check it out. It's really powerful and really beautiful. So now we have a little bit more context to explore our images. So here I can clearly see we're at the Lincoln Memorial. Here is the large statue of Lincoln in the central hall, the focal point of the memorial. And in front of him are the organizers of this march. And I can see over here, this is Martin Luther King Jr. And I can see right here, this is John Lewis, who was the leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, which is another group that was instrumental in the civil rights movement. And we've talked about them before in Bridge from the Past as well. And this man right here is A. Philip Randolph, who actually called for a march on Washington in the 1940s during World War II. So he was one of the main planners for this march. So you have all of the leaders seated in front of Lincoln after the ceremony. So you can see it's sort of a gathering of civil rights groups, of religious leaders, Black and white. Interestingly, no women. That's something we've also talked about on Bridge from the Past, but you can see there's a large group, a collective effort that made this march possible. And again, here is Martin Luther King giving his remarks, his famous speech, the "I Have a Dream" speech at the Lincoln Memorial. This speech is widely recognized as one of the finest examples of American rhetoric, and it's so powerful and it resonates so much even today. I encourage you to read the whole thing on BRI's website. I'm just going to read you one small quote, and it is nothing like listening to Martin Luther King deliver it himself, so bear with me. "I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." So he's invoking the Declaration of Independence. He invokes the Emancipation Proclamation, which of course Lincoln issues during the Civil War, and he invokes the U.S. Constitution. So all of these things call to mind these founding principles of liberty and equality, and how they should be a reality for all people, and yet they weren't in 1963, and the work was unfinished. So it was a real rallying call to complete that work. And you can see, again, the shots of the crowd. 250,000 people came to this march. It was an integrated crowd. There were more African Americans than white, but there were people of all walks of life, of all races that attended, that really wanted to hear and believe in this message. So now I turn it back over to you. We started by asking about the meaning of the Lincoln Memorial and if it changed over time. And we looked at the memorial's dedication and then two significant events that happened in the memorial in the early part of the 20th century. We learned about the ugliness of racial prejudice and segregation and how leaders across time called for change in various ways. They wanted to make sure that that founding principle of equality was real for all Americans and not just, as Martin Luther King says, a promissory note. But as always, there's so much more to the story. I'd love to know what this memorial means to you, what questions you have, or what you'd like to hear more about. Please be sure to leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe to our channel if you learned something. I'll be back throughout the school year to help you think about more big questions in American history just by looking at the images. Until then, everybody, keep your eyes open, keep asking questions, and always look at the pictures. Take care.